Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Costume Co. Back for another wonderful interview with a costume designer from a new movie. It's called Companion, and it's an American horror film that stars Sophie Thatcher. I'm having a problem saying her name. Sophie Thatcher and Jack Quaid. I'm sure you're all familiar with both those actors. They're super hot right now. And it's going to be in theaters on Friday, January 31st. And to have a conversation with me today is Vanessa Porter. She is the costume designer behind this movie, and I'm so delighted to have her and have a chance to talk to her about this, like, such a fun movie. So welcome, Vanessa. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into talking about this movie, which is, I had a chance to see it. Thank you so much. It was, as soon as I saw the trailers, I was very, very interested and knew right away. I'm like, this is a movie for me. This is the type of genre that I know I'll totally love. So before we get into that, though, because this is my first time meeting you, and I just want to get to know you a little bit better. So why don't you tell everyone how you got into costume design and how you got your start?
Sure. I'm a New York City-based costume designer. I've been working in New York in film and television for 17 years. And before that, I grew up in the suburbs of Boston and started in theater in high school. And yeah, just got involved in the theater club, and I'm sort of an introvert and found my way to behind the scenes, and then found my way into costume and designed a lot of the plays for high school theater, and then ended up going to theater school at Cal Arts in California after that. And then, shortly after college, moved back to the East Coast to New York.
So, so Companion, this movie, it's such an interesting mix. So we've got, like, there's some satire and humor, but also there's gore, there's horror, suspense. So now, how would you describe it for someone who doesn't know the movie and hasn't seen the trailer? How would you describe the movie?
Yeah, Companion, it basically follows a couple that are going on a trip. And then sort of as the story develops, there's a betrayal and power struggle kind of ensues. And then it sort of goes off the rail in some wild ways.
Yeah, in such a good way, though. It goes off the rails. Now, what about you? How did you get involved? Like, were you involved in Barbarian at all, or how did you get involved in this project?
I wasn't. I got involved in this project just through my agent, but funny enough, one of the first projects that I did when I moved to New York, over 10 years ago, was The Whitest Kids You Know, which the director of Barbarian was also a producer and director and actor in that. So we sort of reunited on this, but sort of without knowing that that was going to happen.
It's funny because whenever I speak to other designers, it's oftentimes like the connections that you make along the way, and it's nice when you have that opportunity to be able to work together again. So that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, the one of the things I've noticed is, like, it's funny because you mentioned you have a theater background, and I do too. So one of the things I was thinking about is that, it's basically kind of like a play that you have, like, this one setting, you have this small cast of characters and who are all together on a weekend. It's sort of like almost a bit Agatha Christie in a way. With that in mind, how did these elements influence your costume design?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like sort of for everyone. I think it's always, you think it's going to be more difficult if there's tons of costumes and all these changes and all these clothes, but actually it's much more sort of challenging when it's less costumes and each one has to carry so much more weight. So, like, I think Iris in this maybe has three main looks and really one that carries through the majority of the film. So it has to carry all this weight and sort of play in all these different circumstances, and all these things happen to it. So I think that's sort of a challenge and an interesting part of doing something that takes place over just one weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, I had just had another designer on who does contemporary. A lot of times people think that contemporary is easier, but it's oftentimes not, right? Like, so you do have these additional challenges. Um, now,
Mhm.
um, I'm not exactly sure when this is supposed to take place. It feels like it possibly could be in just the near future, just because of the technology that we're working with. Where did you draw inspiration for the costumes then? Were you looking to the past? Were you looking to the future? And did you, and this is maybe a two-part question, did you reference any specific cultural or historical sources, or maybe even people?
Yeah. Um, it is set in the near future. And so, but we were drawing on fashion from the past and trying to sort of walk this line of things that came from the past, but also felt like they could be worn now. Sort of this idea that fashion is cyclical and repeats. Um, and yeah, we were sort of drawing on these styles from mainly the 50s and 60s, in part to match the sort of mid-century modern production design, and in part for reasons that I'm worried about spoiling. but but yeah, we were drawing on 50s and 60s styles, sort of Audrey Hepburn and some of the actresses in sort of French New Wave films, especially.
Okay, so this is where we're going to have to just sort of warn for some spoilers. Now, this is in the trailer, the second trailer. So it's not like, if you've seen the trailer, it's not going to be a huge shock. Um, so Iris, who's played by Sophie Thatcher, who, by the way, she's absolutely brilliant, breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
Her wardrobe really stands out. And you were mentioning sort of Audrey Hepburn and 1950s sort of influences. So how did you develop her look and her color palette? And the spoiler being that it's revealed she's a robot. I don't even know if you call her a robot. Do you call her a robot in the...
Yeah.
You do? Okay.
AI or robot.
Yeah.
But yeah, the conceit of the film is that there is this company, Empathix Robotics, that fabricates these robots, and that customers can, essentially flip through a catalog and pick from different models that have different traits that they want. And as far as the costumes, we came up with this idea that there would be different models that are kind of different archetypes. So like Sophie's character is sort of the girl next door archetype. And there might be like a bad boy archetype, or, these different possible kind of genres. And so in making her this girl next door character, we looked to sort of the original versions of that, like Audrey Hepburn and Sabrina. And also sort of the film is also sort of about gender dynamics and sort of toxic gender norms. So we wanted to kind of throw back to sort of this time where the clothes are much more gendered. But funny enough, it's like very on trend with what's happening in, some trends in women's clothes now, with the cutesy and very demure and doll core kind of looks that are popular. So it's these looks that can harken back to this other time, but also be relevant to now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it looked like I've seen girls sort of fall into that, like they love that sort of vintage sort of look that she has, and her hairstyle, and her, all she always wears like sort of a nice little hair wrap and that type of thing. One of the questions I had regarding the dolls, or sorry, the robots, is it kind of feels like, I don't know if you watch Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but there's a scene where they go into this room and they have racks and racks and racks of clothes that her mom and her have in this just dedicated room. So when I saw the racks kind of rolling into the apartment that went along with her, it kind of reminded me of Barbie. Did you sort of think of Barbie when you were designing her?
Yeah, and I think she is Josh's doll, so it's definitely a relevant connection. And the interesting thing about the character is that she doesn't have the agency of picking her own clothes. Like, her costume choices don't actually speak to her character; they speak to Josh's character. They speak to what he's looking for and what he imagines a woman should be and dress like. So it's interesting to design a character that way. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think
she comes kind of with her own like pack of clothes, sort of like how Barbie, you can buy Barbie an individual one, but then you can buy like a clothing pack for her. So it sort of reminded me of that.
Yeah, I think that's essentially the idea.
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's essentially the idea, and sort of the pink ginghams and everything. Barbie actually wasn't out when we were designing it, but then in the Barbie movie, she does wear a lot of the pink gingham. That is a key costume moment in this as well, which I think totally works as a reference, a retroactive reference.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like, did you have like, so was pink sort of her main palette? Like, what was your sort of palette for her that you decided?
Yeah, I think we started looking at some silhouettes and colors from the 50s and 60s, and really kind of landed on, for me, Umbrellas of Cherbourg has this very like colorful poppy palette that I wanted to bring in for her, just to kind of set up the idea of romance in the beginning, which then obviously gets subverted.
Yes. Yeah, and it's funny too because I was laughing while I was watching the movie because there's a point where Josh talks about how he's a nice guy, and there's that whole nice guy trope, you know.
Mhm.
It's like, no, but no, you're actually not. Um, so he has that nice guy trope, and then the idea that it's almost like trad wives. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
anything like that on TikTok. You've got the trad wives, so it sort of felt like a little bit like that in the way.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That's sort of another reference for it. And I think like the first half of the film, we're kind of playing into the idea that it's like cutesy, demure, fun, at least in the very beginning. But then the look that she has for this long like end dinner scene is much more trad wife, and is when he's like really trying to control her the most vehemently. So that makes sense.
yeah. Now, where did you? I was just wondering about with the clothes. Like, did you build your clothes? Did you do searching for vintage? Like, what? How did you go about getting her outfits together? And
Yeah,
also,
we
because you
shop.
probably needed a lot of multiples.
Yeah, we did need a lot of multiples.
Yeah.
We shopped it, but we shopped it with vintage styles and silhouettes in mind. So I think, to speak to the trad wife thing, we bought some of it at Brooks Brothers, Ultimate Trad Wife. And then we also shopped at some like of that sort of French girl aesthetic brands, Ciao Lucia. We bought a lot of stuff from. Um, yeah, and sort of fast fashion that we felt like read as period inspired.
hmm did Sophie Thatcher have any like sort of influence during the fittings with you? Did she have any sort of ideas herself that she brought to the fittings?
Yeah, for sure. She is quite a vintage style connoisseur herself. So she, and also a vintage film, she's super knowledgeable about. So she came with a lot of her own references as well. Beatrice Dale and Anna Karina are like actresses that she definitely idolized and brought to the table as style references. So we really collaborated really closely on looking at these different references and how to take sort of her aesthetic, which is a little bit darker, and turn it, into more of this romantic side.
Now, and in terms of her outfits, do you have a favorite,
Um,
or is that hard?
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I like all the little ginghams. Are fun. There's a gingham pants and a gingham short.
Yeah, I love the outfit she wears when she goes down to the water, obviously we know what happens there. I don't know if you call it like almost like a romper, or that little outfit was adorable.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think we found that the headbands became really iconic. I think for her, and made
Mhm.
it feel more sort of artificial. That she would have, a headband that matches the shirt, that matches the short, that matches the shoe is like a very doll like thing that people don't really do in real life.
Absolutely, yeah, little bags, little tote
Mhm.
bags and things. And actually, it's funny. I was just thinking this that I can imagine at like my next con I go to. There's going to be all of these girls dressed up in her
I
outfits. I see so many. I am positive of it.
I hope so.
Um,
I would love that.
Now let's talk about some of the other characters. So, do you have some insight? Like, no, obviously Sergey is like, sort of an outlier. Really, really fun. But in terms of some of the other characters, do you want to touch a bit on them? So, because we've got Patrick and Eli, who are a couple, and then of course Josh is the boyfriend, and Kat, who is Sergey's I guess, girlfriend as well.
Mhm.
So where did you come up with some ideas for them and their outfits and their looks?
Yeah, with them, we were kind of wanting to play with the idea that the near future is a little bit more artificial than our contemporary time, like that we've gotten a little bit more into social media and more into presentation and more into sort of this artificial self presentation. So trying to make these looks that would feel like kind of overly put together and overly sort of clean and styled, and maybe create some ambiguity that maybe some other characters might be robots, but maybe not, and have that be something that maybe people are playing with in their mind as they're watching.
Yeah, and Josh, like he's supposed to be like a sort. Where were you sort of going with him? Like, is he's like he's a self-claimed nice guy? Were you kind of going with boy next door for him? I mean, and he cries poor, but I don't feel like he's poor. Like, where is he economically? Like where would he buy his clothes? Do you think if he was trying?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think he, of all of them, cares the least about his clothes. I think he would shop at just sort of the basic J. Crew, like the most kind of generic male stuff, J. Crew, Gap, whatever. I think he's just trying to present sort of generic, nice, non-threatening guy.
I love the jacket he's wearing when he meets Iris in the supermarket. It felt very Steve McQueen. I forget the
Mhm.
name of the brand,
Yeah,
but
Barracuda.
yeah, Barracuda, exactly. So it felt very Steve McQueen, very classic, cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't want to give spoilers away here, but in terms of how he is at the mansion versus how he is in the supermarket, did you approach those two looks differently?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just say this is a spoiler.
Sure. Okay.
But the supermarket is a fabricated memory by the Empathix Robotics company for Iris to have and for him to have watched and then have. So the idea is that they sort of built this commercial and that they bought the costumes for it, and it's not really his clothes, kind of, based on his style, but better. But funny enough, the idea, there's two such memories in the movie. There's Josh's memory, which is the grocery store, and then there's Eli's memory, which is the Halloween party. And the idea is that Eli has more money. So the production value on Eli's memory is much higher than the production value on Josh's memory. Like
Oh, that's really interesting.
they bought into different scales of, memory.
Wow, that's really interesting. So when you add additional characters and avatars, I suppose it costs more money.
Yeah, that's the
That,
idea. It's not stated in the movie, obviously, but it's
sure, I love that
the
though.
idea behind those
That's
memories.
really cool. Well, while we were on that, I might as well touch on so for Eli's memory, which then ends up being Josh's memory as well. You have them in like a dinosaur kind of costume, and then I guess Patrick's wearing like a vampire, I think. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like
Yeah,
how
that also
I guess it was in the script. I don't know.
yeah, it's in the script, but that also we wanted to make be something that felt very artificial. So we tried to build this Halloween costume looks, all the background looks and principal looks in a way where it didn't feel like real people at a real Halloween party. It's meant to feel almost like a Sims game Halloween party. Like all of the different characters in it are just like the most generic. Like I think there's a Roman fighter and a witch and I don't remember what else is there, mermaid, or like, but they're just the most generic things in the most sort of prefabricated way on purpose to give this like artificial feeling.
Yeah, and I love the dance sequence. That's such a blast. It's so fun. Um, you guys must have been laughing while you were shooting, some of these scenes. These scenes must have been a riot to do, right?
Yeah, there's a lot in this movie that was really fun.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, okay, because I was asking you to describe this movie earlier. I probably would describe this as a horror film personally, but with like humor, like not a or it could be maybe a dark comedy even. So because of that, there's a lot of blood. And what kind of challenges did that pose for for you and your crew?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, we shot over, I don't remember, 20 something days. And she's bloody for many of them. And with different kind of stages as more and more things happen to her. So the wardrobe department really had to break down very meticulous detail, different stages of the costume, and what scenes and when she would wear them, and always be switching them out or adding blood, or it was a very meticulous process that I was lucky to have people that were really on top of.
Oh, one thing we didn't talk about when we were talking about some of the other characters is Sergey. So what was like, Sergey, poor Sergey, he's sort of misunderstood.
Yeah.
what I mean, did you kind of go with the stereotype of Sergey, or what were your sort of thoughts behind him and his looks?
Yeah, he developed in a funny way. I think we wanted him to feel really enigmatic. We wanted it to be something where you couldn't really put your finger on exactly what the reference was, or exactly, what we were making a shout out to. So we kind of pulled from a different era than we had been pulling the other characters from. We pulled more from like a 90s kind of look with this mullet and these somewhat 90s inspired looks. And yeah, just tried to create this sort of enigmatic character that we felt like you hadn't seen somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. What about Kat? She's, I think she's supposed to be, at least from what I can tell, a bit of a threat for Iris. I think she sees her as a threat. And so kind of felt like she had, like, while you have Iris is very, and her name is even a flower. She's
Mm-hmm.
very bright and colorful. Kat is sort of like the juxtaposition of that in a way. Like, is that sort of how you approached her?
Yeah, we wanted her to sort of be two sides of one coin with Iris. So sort of in the first dance sequence when they're there the first night, we wanted it to be like they're almost in the same silhouette of clothes. It's just different colors, to sort of really feel like two sides of the same thing, which is to try to make this statement that, or just to kind of widen the statement of what the robot couple represents, and that it is, a statement on real couples, and the larger culture.
Yeah, and also because Iris she doesn't have the awareness that she's a robot. That's the other thing. It's sort of she doesn't have that agency. So she's, all of her interactions with people are like with her understanding that she is a human. She believes of herself being a human being. So I could see that. But and then so I can understand why, like, obviously Kat is beautiful and seems very polished and sophisticated and everything. So I could see why she would maybe feel sort of threatened by that,
Mm-hmm.
but not in a hostile way at any rate, because she's like, you don't like me, do you? Like, she's
Yeah,
one of those people, like you say, who probably would, like a Betty White. She likes everybody to like her, probably.
yeah, sure. I think I think she's conditioned that way for sure. Yeah.
So, aside now, actually, you were mentioning earlier, this sounds like it was quite a short shoot. Did you kind of all haul up in like a hotel for like the shoot and live near that venue, or the mansion where you were shooting?
Yeah, we there was this, house that's in the film, on this like sort of big hill, where we shot the bulk of it and where we staged a lot of it. Our costume room was in sort of the wine cellar of this house.
Oh, that's not a bad place to have it.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Yeah. And yeah, we stayed in hotels nearby because it was in a part of upstate that would have been too long a commute from the city where everybody lives. So yeah, we were, kind of isolated in this way. And then funny enough, the strikes happened in the midst of our shooting. So we had to put it on hold. And when we came back to it, we had been shooting it in the summer. And then when we came back to it, we needed to come back to it in winter because of when they thought this was going to come out and when they were pushing for it to come out. So we had to shoot all these summer scenes in December, and everybody was freezing, and we had to do all this work to try to keep them warm. And, you know, she's driving around in that convertible and it's actually snowing, and they must have had to take it out. I haven't seen it, but, you know, it was actually snowing when they were shooting that scene.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Wow.
As we had all these like electric blankets over her so that she wouldn't freeze. It was pretty.
No, I was going to say, because I was going to ask you, aside from the blood, what were the biggest challenges? But to have, and also just even from a continuity point of view, that must have been very difficult and challenging as well, to have it sort of like, you know, stopped in the middle and then come back and then have to reset everything again. That must have been really hard.
Yeah, it was hard. And really just the weather was such an issue of, you know, they're really wearing summer clothes. They're in very much shorts and tank tops and having to run around outside and, you know.
So you were in upstate New York?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that's very similar weather to Canada. So where I live.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine that must have been cold. Oh my goodness. But even for you guys, because if you're outside, you would have been freezing as well.
Yes. Everybody was freezing.
Yeah. So regarding Companion and your work on that, what's your most proud moment on this show, on this movie?
Yeah, I'm proud of Iris's looks. I'm proud that we were able to bring in these retro references, but still have it feel relevant. I'm proud of that, and I think some of the Stargate looks are really fun. Yeah, I'm just kind of proud to be a part of the project. I think the film is really cool and memorable, and just happy to be a part of it on the whole, aside from the costumes.
Now I know it's not released yet, but has there been any reaction to it? Like, have you had any feedback on what people think of the costumes or of the movie itself?
I've seen some reviews online that all seem really positive. People seem properly shocked and excited, so that's great.
Now, the other thing, I was just thinking about this today, like just before I came on here. I was thinking that this is being released right before Valentine's Day. Was that an intentional thing to release it right before Valentine's Day?
I don't know what the thoughts on the release were. Originally, I think I had heard that it was going to come out in the summer, and then it became something that was coming out in the winter. So maybe it was about that holiday. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because even in the promos, they do this whole thing. It's the same studio that brought you the Notebook,
Yeah,
which is hilarious.
For sure.
Well, anyway, in terms of Companion, congratulations. I'm sure that you'll have many accolades, and you must be so proud of this work.
Thank you.
And I'm sure everyone's excited for when the show comes out so that people can actually get out to the theaters and see it. But before I let you go, do you want to tell me a little bit about what you're working on next and what you have coming up?
I last week the show Goosebumps, The Vanishing came out on Disney and Hulu, which I designed. Sort of a teenager horror movie and TV show. So that came out last week. And yeah, there's one other movie that I finished a while ago, The Toxic Avenger, that I'm hoping is going to come out in the nearish future, that has a sort of niche but excited audience. So hopefully we'll see that someday.
Amazing. And so are you working on anything at the moment, or are you taking a little break finally?
Kind of a January, break, and then we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Now, and do you usually work in New York, or do you travel around as needed?
I work in New York, and then I also travel a lot. I've done projects all over the U.S., and we shot The Toxic Avenger in Bulgaria, and I shot a TV show in Puerto Rico. So kind of lots of travel and lots of New York both.
Mm-hmm. But you got to do Goosebumps in Vanishing in New York?
Yep, that was.
I know David Schwimmer. David Schwimmer is the star of that, I believe, right?
Yep, and that's a Brooklyn story in this season.
Wonderful. I have my kids. I'll have to get them to watch it because they're big Goosebumps fans. So
yeah, it's fun.
But Vanessa, maybe you'll come back and we can talk about that show. Great. If I haven't scared you off. Well, it's been so nice having you and talking about Companion, and I can't wait for everybody to get out and see it because it's so good. And also, of course, I'm a big fan of Jack Quaid. Like he's, of course, in The Boys, and Sophie Thatcher. She's in Yellow Jackets, and she's also been in that in Heretic, which I just saw
Yeah.
recently. So,
Both
hot cast.
wonderful, nice people too.
Yeah, Harvey Gillen, of course, who by the way, before I let you go quickly, did you did you have a little bit of a difficult time costuming him, or maybe you didn't? Because I was just thinking, like, he's so not his character in What We Do in the Shadows. I kind of love that. I kind of love how he's such a different character in this. So we didn't
Yeah.
get to touch on him.
I think he embraced that. I think he embraced the opportunity to do something different. And I also think, I think even more so over time since, is very involved in trying to create a personal style. He seems really into that right now. His Instagram has lots of cool looks. So it was fun to collaborate with him on the looks too.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Well, and I'm looking for, well, it's such a hot cast, so they're all going to become,
And
huge
all
stars.
really nice people as well.
Oh, that's nice to hear. I always love hearing that. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who's watching, I appreciate you spending time with us, and have a great evening. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.